thank you for joining us at BRICS Africa channel, and congratulations on your elections. I think it's wonderful, and I'm sure it must be an amazing feeling. How do you feel today?
Thank you very much. Thank you. I think we are quite honored as South Africa to have received the support we received in the election. Of the 49 eligible votes, we got 41. So that's a resounding mandate. It's a vote of confidence to say that we can drive the infrastructure and energy agenda for the continent and work closely with member states to deliver the Africa we want. So quite exciting, quite a privilege, and I'm really honored.
Take us through your daily work before you decided to jump in and take all this responsibility. Just give a bit of your background.
I've always worked on African development issues from the very beginning of my career. I started my career at the South African Institute of International Affairs. I did a lot of research on trade, South Africa's trade with the continent's trade with itself at that time. Then I joined the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition. Well, at the time it was called Department of Trade and Industry. Now it's called Trade, Industry and Competition in South Africa. And I started my career as a deputy director for the Southern Africa portfolio of the department. And, part of the work was negotiating the SADC trade protocol at the time. It was not complete. And of course, driving bilateral relations with the continent. So I've moved up the ranks in the civil service, having the African developmental agenda as, the anchor and the true north to my career. So for me, this is not a departure from what I believe my purpose is, which is to contribute to the development of the African continent.
Okay, wow. Well, you did really spend a lot of time. How many years is it now?
With the department, South African Public Service, 23 years. 23 years.
So you really been part of building this infrastructure.
Absolutely.
And what do you think, or I don't know how the process goes, but I would imagine you had a set of priorities for infrastructure and development. What are some of those that you can share with us?
The great thing about this election is that it happened just after we concluded the first 10-year review of Agenda 2063. And so it was relatively easy to see where the gaps are. And of course, the biggest gap is acceleration of infrastructure delivery, mobilizing financing. But I believe that my immediate priority getting into office, I need to make sure that we've got, cohesive stances and a cohesive approach and from the different member states. One, on the energy mix we need to have on the continent, because energy poverty is a big issue that we need to address. And we need to have an Africa position around the energy mix that we need to have from a policy standpoint, and of course from the flagship projects then that we can begin to mobilize. Two is prioritizing the cross-border infrastructure projects that we need to accelerate implementation of. We've got a program of infrastructure development in Africa. It's got 69 projects. I think 69 is a lot. At least if we're going to have a midterm plan of action, which is the 4 years of my term, we would need to really have high impact projects and fewer projects, but that have multiplier effect in the different regions of the continent. So that will be one of my priorities as well.
Okay. Just one thing I always hear is that a lot of people talk about they don't have enough projects. Normally the bankers say, we don't have enough projects, and the projects are not bankable, the projects are not project ready. And on the finance side, that we have all this money, where are the projects? And on the project side, like, hey, who do we talk to? How do you close this gap? Because seemingly these two stakeholders don't ever seem to meet together.
Yes, and my hope is that I can be the bridge between the two stakeholders. I think it's really about having the bridge, so that those, and it's mainly member states, really, it's governments that really play a bigger role in the project preparation phase of all of these projects, or many of these projects, because of the high risk level, right? So you've got a lot of development finance institutions in that space, and then you've got, of course, your commercial bankers on the other side that say, but we don't have enough projects. But the reality is that the projects are there. So it's about then working together to see where is the actual gap? And I'm quite optimistic that it won't be a difficult bridge to cross, especially if we use, the power and the muscle and the convening power that is the African Union to really get the two stakeholders to speak, because we have to accelerate implementation. So we have to bridge that very quickly.
Sure. The New Development Bank comes to mind, and I ask myself, I think the times last year, South Africa is about 18% of the funds available to it.
Yeah.
And I ask myself, with so many projects, what goes wrong? Is it because the BRICS Bank itself also regulates itself the same way as your IMFs and the World Bank? Is there any change in the BRICS Bank that you think it will really mobilize for projects to happen?
No, certainly. For the rest of the continent, absolutely. And that has been South Africa's position, to say, how do we leverage all these multilateral platforms and institutions that we have for the greater good of the continent? So I see the BRICS Bank financing a bit more projects in other parts of the continent outside of South Africa. The South African government was very strategic and clear to say that funding should be mainly for Transnet, Eskom, our SOCs that needed to be assisted, as it were. So it's about countries being strategic about what's priority for them, and us as the African Union and my office in particular working with the countries to look at those projects that will be catalytic, that will then help us integrate as we want to.
These key projects, you say you want fewer and yet impactful.
Yes.
What kind of criteria are you using here?
The most important thing has to be they have to be cross-border in nature. Our biggest infrastructure challenge on our continent even now is the fact that our infrastructure does not integrate us. It's still the quintessential pit-to-port model that the colonialist planned, whether it's rail, road, etc. So you still have our roads leading from the nearest either agricultural resource or mineral resource outward to the nearest port out. And that is one of the biggest contributors to our low levels of intra-Africa trade, because we don't have the connecting infrastructure, both on land and even aviation. We still find a lot of countries where people still have to fly out of our continent to another continent to come back to the continent. So because of that fragmentation, we have to prioritize cross-border infrastructure that connects more than one country to the other, or more than two countries. So that will be the primary criteria. Or criterion, as it were.
Okay. And the projections I'm sure you'll be working on the projections of the intra-Africa trade. I'm not sure the latest number now. It used to be 15, 18. I don't know what is it nowadays.
It's still there. Depending on who you ask, then some say 20, but it doesn't bridge the 20% mark. Okay. So between 18 and 20%. So we have to shift that needle.
Sure.
And it's not just the intra-Africa trade number that is low. It's our contribution to global manufacturing as a whole continent is only 2%.
Sure.
It's yes. And our contribution to global trade as a whole continent is 3%. Okay. So it means that we also have to have infrastructure that builds productive capacity for us to industrialize. So there's a lot of work to be done.
So moving the needle, is it by 2%, 5%? What are you looking at in the next 4 years?
I would prefer to set those targets with my other stakeholders, but I think that we have to aim high. Okay. We have to really have moonshots. We have to move by more than 1%, more than 5%, per variable. Quite a stretch, but we can do it. I think we've moved quite a bit to get the right policies in place that we didn't have in the past. So it's now really about acceleration, and I'm optimistic that we can bridge the gap.
And you did mention that you'll be working closely with Africa, inter-Africa trade. I think Wamkile. I'm sure you guys have worked together before, and you kind of
yes, we work together in the Department of Trade and Industry in South Africa. Yes, so we do have a history together, at least in South Africa's inception and contribution to the continental free trade.
What is he saying to you on the challenges? Africa is not really easy to navigate. What is he saying to you of like, hey, thank God you are here. How do we?
No. It's a good thing. We're not coming in as South Africans necessarily. We're coming in as Pan-African contributors, but because we understand the need for acceleration of infrastructure delivery, because the work they've done in Ghana has been great. I mean, they've negotiated the different agreements. They've literally set the predictable environment on the continent for trade and investment to happen. They've set up the dispute settlement mechanism that has never existed on our continent, so that anybody that does business with us and they have a dispute can go and have that arbitrated. So they've set great institutions and protocols that help us to integrate from a legal framework. Or from a legal standpoint. Now we have to do it practically.
Sure.
Because there's no use having the right legal framework, but you don't have the infrastructure to move products or to move services. So that's where we come in. So there's a symbiosis that then says, for us to really have real integration, we need to have hard infrastructure and soft infrastructure provision that is anchored by this legal framework that enables integration to happen. So it's quite an exciting time, because we can then put the two pieces of the puzzle together for development.
And the other part is the energy side of things.
Yes.
We are being termed energy poor from Cape to Cairo, really. How do we change that needle?
You're right. We are an energy poor continent. 600 million plus, population that have zero access to electricity. That's 43% of our population, and it goes even beyond just energy broadband access, only 25% for the whole continent. So there's a lot of bridging to be done, and that is why it's important that we have a unified position as Africa to say, what would be our policy regarding the energy mix we require to deal with the energy poverty. Because we are mindful of the climate change impact. We have to have renewable energy and to transition, but we also understand that we've got a big energy poverty gap to bridge. And my priority is that, talking with the member states, let's agree on the energy mix that we require for the balance that we need. And
what do you think in that mix will be? I would imagine your base loads will still going to be using coal. That's what Minister Mantashe keeps on saying of, hey,
It'll take a conversation and a quick one, but and part of why we're saying the mix is exactly that. How do we strike the balance between the two? Because we cannot necessarily just be powered by renewables at this juncture with the levels of energy poverty that we have. But the balance and the fossil fuels that we will probably need, how do we make sure then that we've got the right technologies? We do have technologies that make sure that coal does not contribute destructively to the environment. So technologies are there for that. Other countries have views around nuclear, for example. So that is why for us to have a unified Africa position that says this is going to be our energy mix will be one of the urgent tasks.
You have a quagmire here. Those who can supply you with the energy or the clean energy are also the same people that benefit from what you are describing as like from pit to port. How do you negotiate that? Because I'm seeing a situation that, yes, you want to expand the mix, you want to use nuclear. Take us through, what is the appetite in the other regions of Africa around nuclear? Maybe let's start there.
The appetite is going to be something that I establish when I'm in office, right? Because I'm yet to then sit with the actual policy makers of all the regions with the right mandate to actually convene the conversation. Then we'll be able to come out of that with what makes sense for our continent. The one thing I will say though is that there's no one size fits all for all regions on the continent. What SADC requires is not what the Sahel would require or what North Africa would require, etc. So it's also going to be very important that I have strategic partnerships with the regional economic communities, because they deal with their own regional member states on a day-to-day basis, as it were. For us then to understand what type of mix we will have, for the different regions, for us to accelerate energy provision.
Okay, and just a few ones. South Africa just started with an entire project of getting nuclear, and the next thing, Minister is telling us that no, we need the process to be clean, clear, transparent. Let's start again. How do you navigate of this? One step forward, two steps back, because it happens from whether it's in Egypt, whether it's in South Africa. It seems Africa, especially when it comes to energy, and especially as you said that your contribution as a continent to manufacturing in the globe is less than 2%. How do you ensure those policymakers are playing ball. I'm sure even President Adesina, with the bank side of the African Development Bank, has been pushing of like light up Africa.
Yep.
But what do you think is going to be that magic stroke that you bring?
I think that the important thing will be using the AU convening power for us to have an Africa position and to domesticate those positions. It then helps member states not to, change too far off the priorities set by the AU. So my priority is really to come to that collaborative position by the different member states and regional positions around this that can then hopefully help countries to make their decisions and actually anchor it to the AU vision for energy provision. So that's what I want to bring into the office that we don't have at the moment, actually.
Lerato, new commissioner, congratulations once again.
Thank you very much.
And thanks for joining us on the BRICS Africa channel.
Thank you.